some of it, but
Yeah.
just as a separate, concise thing, what is a blockchain?
Sure. So blockchain is same as a bari khata, a ledger, which say every munshi or every bank manages to write down where we started from, where we are today, what are the balances across the people who are part of this ecosystem, and any transaction that were to happen in the system in the future would get recorded in the same way that anyone who has this ledger or this booklet now can reproduce all the entries. The only difference is that only the person who is writing the entries is not just the in charge of that book. Now a lot of computers around the world are in charge of that book and decides what goes in it and what gets logged in the system, and that's where trust gets established. So think of it like a ledger, like a book itself, but instead of one person being the authority on writing the entries that Ashish paid $100 to Rohan, now when Ashish pays $100 to Rohan, then hundreds and millions of computers around the world figures out whether this is a right transaction. Right. And if they believe it's a right transaction, 51% of them, then they put it on the book and make it official, right? And any entry that starts after that would, pile on to this. So it would say, now you transfer $50 back to me, then it would be after this entry. That first Ashish transferred $100 to Rohan, then Rohan transferred $50 back to Ashish. So Ashish has now $50 and Rohan has now $50.
So again, to take our analogy further, this is basically a mohalla made up of, so all the nosiest, gossipiest neighbors that you have, except these ones deal exclusively in the truth. Like, that's the thing. This is that auntie or that uncle who knows Rohan kahan gaya tha, kiske sath gaya tha, kab gaya tha, kaun sa shirt or kaun sa perfume pehen ke gaya tha, kitna talli wapas aaya, lekin ekdam truthfully. Like,
yes, and they don't have, and their truth needs to be based on incentive, right? अब ये तो नहीं है कि आप उन्हें रात के 12 बजे बुलाओगे कि यार रोहन क्या कपड़े पहन के गया था, वेरीफाई करो, वो कहेंगे यार मुझे सोने दो, मैं क्यों आऊं, मेरा क्या इंसेंटिव है, right? So ultimately every transaction that get written on this book, the blockchain incentivizes these computers on participating into the system. So आप मोहल्ले को कभी भी बुला सकते हो, but आप जब भी बुलाओगे आपको उन्हें कुछ इंसेंटिव देना पड़ेगा, and that is their incentive to be truthful, to be part of the system, to validate your transaction. क्योंकि से अगर आप मोहल्ले को बुला रहे हो बार बार, बाद में सब लोग आना छोड़ देंगे, बाद में एक बंदा बचेगा जो हमेशा आएगा, जो आपका बेस्ट फ्रेंड है,
और वो यूजुअली नहीं इधर बेस्ट फ्रेंड होता है या सबसे इरिटेटिंग होता है, लाइक सबसे चीप होता है.
दोनों केस में
वेरी केयरफुल.
Yes, so दोनों केस में सिस्टम इज बायस्ड. If there is only one person, then he is the truth bearer. He can say नहीं यार आशीष ने तो पैसे दिए ही नहीं, और या either he can say नहीं रोहन को तो पैसे मिले ही नहीं थे, Ashish has to pay again, right? So the more people are there in the system, the more unbiased it becomes. To make more people become part of this ecosystem, the incentive mechanism is built into the blockchain to allow these people to be, now validate every transaction, do it truthfully, and make sure that the system integrity is maintained no matter what happens.
And what is this incentive? If you could explain to me, please, like what is the incentive that is given to, say, somebody who's on the Bitcoin blockchain or on the Ethereum blockchain, for example?
Sure. So let's talk about Bitcoin blockchain. So this is today, it's a block fee that gets released. Every block get mined. What is a block? Block is a combination of transactions. So agar say blockchain pe there are thousands of transactions which are happening every second. So what miners do is they pick not one transaction at a time. They pick, say, 1,000 transactions at a time. They validate all the transaction and they now try to push it to this book that we talked about. And once that book accepts, then 50% of the people, 51% of the people on the blockchain says, this is right. And they push it to the book. Then the book gives out 6.25 Bitcoin to the person who validated, who helped validate that this transaction was correct.
Gives out, like you said, 0.25 Bitcoin to whoever.
6.25 Bitcoin.
6.25 Bitcoin. Okay.
Bitcoin. Yes. To the person who helped verifying that record on the book. And obviously, that Bitcoin has some value in the market, and that is how he gets that value out of the ecosystem. The second value that he gets is every time I pay you money, there is a small transaction fee that I pay to the ecosystem as well.
Right.
So जो उन 1000 transaction के लिए minor fee दी गई होगी, that also that person gets. So he gets two kind of
Okay.
rewards. One is the block fee. Another is the minor fee paid by each one of the individuals who are making these transactions on the blockchain.
So it is, again, if I had to simplify it, would it be correct to say that it's essentially he's getting a commission from two sources?
Exactly.
Right, one from the larger, like, just overall ecosystem, and another sort of smaller bunch of commissions from every transaction that was verified.
Yes.
Got
yes.
it. Okay. Could you explain the actual use of the word blockchain?
So think of blockchain as a chain, right? As a line where things are getting added up. They're not getting removed. ऐसा नहीं है कि आप लाइन तोड़ के बीच में कहीं घुस जाओगे, right?
हाँ, okay.
So it is a line, right? और वो blocks की बनी है. Every block contains transactions, right?
Okay,
So
got it.
think of it like a ride. There is a roller coaster ride, and there is a line in front of it. Every time somebody wants to ride that roller coaster, they would go at the end of the queue, not in between, because that would mean breaking the system. And
Right.
Every time a miner validates, okay, this person is eligible to ride the roller coaster, they put it at the end of the queue and make sure, give him a unique number that this is where you belong. You are standing behind this guy. So they link it to that and they create a chain that, everybody in the chain knows their position, knows where they stand, and any change in that line can be caught by anybody outside, and
Got
they
it.
can remove that person from there.
It's the financial equivalent of the human centipede. That's a horrible
Yes.
analogy, but it is what it is. What the transaction fee that you mentioned? What determines this transaction fee,
Sure.
or that's paid out?
Sure. So transaction fee is based on how fast, slow you want your transaction to be approved. Say for an example, let's take that Mohalla wala example again. And
Sure.
you ask people to validate a transaction between Ashish and Rohan. Obviously, the entire Mohalla may not come, right? But you say, ki, okay, I used to pay you 1 rupee for coming to my place and validate transaction, but this time I'm going to pay you $10 each. So more people would show up and more people would have an incentive to validate that transaction. So this is
Right.
where the transaction fee is determined, is based on your incentive and the incentive of the miner. How do you match that to speed up your transaction on the blockchain? So the
Got
more number of transactions are there on the blockchain, you have to pay higher to make sure that
Right.
your transaction is the one, because उस मोहल्ले वाले को बहुत सारे लोग बुला रहे होंगे, right?
हाँ,
To validate their transaction.
Sure.
अब वो कहाँ जाए? अब वो एक
You
ही
pay
जगह जा
surge
सकता है।
pricing. You pay surge pricing,
Yes,
basically.
It's surge pricing.
It's
Exactly.
surge pricing. This damn surge pricing is everywhere in my life, and I hate it.
So yes, so this is surge pricing, making sure that you are giving enough incentive to these miners to pick your transaction over the other guy, right?
On a side